as far as brands goes. And you have to think about the fact that because our marketplace is so diverse now and there's so many options, brands that succeed are the ones that figure out who is that one specific type of customer that I need to appeal to, and will see my brand and will say, whoa, that brand is me. That is exactly who I need to buy from. And if you're able to overwhelmingly convince one type of person to buy your brand, then that's all you need in order to create a successful business right now, because your audience size is like to the world, right? So no niche is too small right now. I actually recommend that you niche as much as possible because you have access to so many different types of people right now. So the more personality you can show, the more strange and like out there you can be. There are going to be millions of people that are into what you do. So just having as much personality as possible is my big recommendation as far as creating a brand and standing out amongst the sea of competitors that are out there right now.
So in your own experience, both as a business owner and working with other business owners, can you see a sort of direct correlation between the more personality that is put out there, the stronger the brand grows?
Oh, 100%. I think this is why, Kylie Jenner is like the youngest billionaire, right? A female billionaire, I quote unquote self-made, whatever that controversy was. But I think the reason why she has built such an empire is because she mixed in an influencer-esque strategy into her marketing that was very personality driven. So people bought her personality in addition to the brand. Like by the time she was ready to launch her makeup line, she had built such a personality that people knew, and they understood like what it means to buy a Kylie Jenner product, like who she embodies and whatnot. So yeah, I mean, she is like the number one success story and epitome of why a personality driven brand works. And there are countless other brand examples very similar to her that are maybe not as airing so much on the influencer side, but kind of borrow some of those strategies, and it works super, super well. People really want to connect. It's funny because, we're becoming a more online world every day, but people still want to very strongly connect with other human beings and find brands that represent them and embody who they want to be. So it's becoming more prevalent, and it's only going to become more at the forefront of strategies that work.
I think you're definitely right. And especially with small businesses, there are going to be other people out there doing the same thing that you're doing, unless your product is so specific. And I think that's really the only thing that sets you apart, because there are going to be other people out there who are just as good as you are. But if your personality speaks to somebody more than theirs does, that's a huge way of setting yourself apart. I think the problem that a lot of people run into with this is that they're so afraid about turning off a portion of that target market. And instead of focusing on their ideal client, as you said, really figuring out who is your client and getting into their head, they're so worried about sort of offending somebody else or turning somebody off their products. Do you have any advice for sort of getting over that fear and really taking that brave step of being you online?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing is to realize that the more broad you are, no one responds anymore to copy and narratives that are super broad, because we're just bombarded with information. So our brain will naturally act out information that doesn't emotionally resonate with us. So there's like that psychological aspect of like, this is what you're working with right now. And if you aren't humble enough to say, I need to craft my content according to what the market wants, then you're already kind of screwed as an entrepreneur. That's like the number one thing you need to be cognizant of.
Is there a way to sort of find that courage?
Yeah, so I think that that courage comes from kind of going back to what I said before. Like, you really need to address when your personal holdups are ruining your business. So I think that courage comes from a self-awareness place of understanding, okay, I know that I'm really scared of being vulnerable right now, but if this is actually blocking me from creating the best business that I can create, then what's kind of the point? So the courage also, there's like that humility aspect of like being really humble to what your customer needs. And then I think that another aspect of that courage is understanding that if you are creating a business that is wanting to make an impact on the world, then your customer is out there waiting for you to reach out to them. And if you are not in a place where you can be vulnerable enough as a business to reach out to those people and do the things that you need to do so that they hear you and they find you, then kind of what's the point? You're playing like a little like fairy tale game of business without actually going all in on it, right? So I think, it really comes down to just like you being radically honest with yourself about what is stopping you from being courageous and making sure that you get to the bottom of that question. And because for me, like that was a huge struggle actually in like the last 2 years that I worked with my coach on, was like I found that my biggest block as far as being vulnerable and having that courage to, for example, create an Instagram business account and actually like be on video and things like that, that came from a very personal holdup of not wanting to be visible and what will people think of me. And that like external criticism was very strong for me. So my biggest block wasn't anything business related. It was something that was very personally tied to my vulnerabilities as a person. So, it's kind of like a non-business answer, but I always say that all of the personal aspects of building your business tie into how successful you'll be as a business owner. So that's kind of been my experience. And when I coach my clients on it, it's always a non-business related thing that's stopped people from being courageous and stepping up.
I've looked at a bit of your kind of interviews before, your TED Talk and things like that. And I know that that's something you talk about, how important the personal growth is alongside the business growth, and how if you're not willing to kind of delve into some of these things and really figure out where you stand on them, how can your business grow? And I think that makes so much sense. But do you find that that's something that most people are able to do on their own? Or is that where a coach becomes kind of invaluable because they're able to coax some of that out of you a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of tough to do on your own, because if it was easy, then you would have done it already, right? So I actually personally have found that coaches are really, really important. And even if you can't access a coach, just things like self-help books and whatnot that ask the right questions are really, really helpful in helping you kind of come to those realizations. But I do think, for me at least, and all of my friends and colleagues that have gone through similar experiences as me, like external help, external questioning, external inquiry, like that humility to kind of look outside yourself is just so important.
Yeah, and it's strange how that is such a difficult thing. As you're saying, the hardest part for you wasn't anything business related. It was coming to terms with sort of the ways that you were holding yourself back. And I think that's so true for so many small businesses, but it's kind of opening up enough to admit what those things are. And I think the self-help books and stuff are great. And I've read so many great books about business where these things come to light. But sometimes I find actually speaking with somebody face to face and having that interaction is when you really get down into the depths of it. It's easy to kind of hide a little bit when you're on your own, but if somebody is coaxing that out of you, I think there's so much value to that.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree with that.
I think one of the challenges right now, so anybody listening to this in the future, we've spoken a little bit about this. We are still in the midst of this coronavirus pandemic, which has really affected things for so many businesses, small and large, around the world. A lot of people who haven't had to sell online before have either had to adapt to sell online or are going to be adapting to sell online in the near future. I think for a lot of people, they're concerned about that and wondering how they are going to make that work. They're used to selling in person. They're used to a very different approach to sales. Why is it that so many of us find selling online so much harder than it is in person?
Yeah, so when I talk to entrepreneurs, a lot of them will say, if I have someone in front of me, I can sell them anything, but I can't do the same thing when it comes to selling online. And I think it has to do with the fact that um, when we sell online, we kind of forget our pleasantries. We forget what we're supposed to do when we sell to someone in person, where when you sell in person, you're supposed to get to know the person. How are you? Where are you from? And you kind of build this relationship of getting the person to like you first and then get them to buy from you, right? And you share the story behind why you created the product and things like that. So I think that when we're online, we kind of forget that there's another person at the receiving end of whatever we're selling. And we actually do this thing where we go straight to selling, hey, this is what I'm selling, this is the price. We go straight to closing and forgetting all those previous steps of building a relationship with people, getting to know them, and things like that. So I think that's like the biggest thing. And the fact that we've kind of entered this internet social media world without really a guidebook of how do you socialize online properly. I think that a lot of us are functioning off of our own understanding of how you're supposed to do things and socialize online, rather than like taking lessons from how we socialize in person and kind of adopting them for like selling online as a business. So I think that's like the biggest hiccup for sure. And I think that there's also kind of this lack of respect for online sales, where a lot of people will clump marketing and sales as one thing, when actually sales in and of itself is an art form that you have to learn. And it's not something like creating a content calendar for your social media. That's not sales. Like, that's very different. And it's all a very strategic strategy that has to be put into place. So I think it's a mix of those two things that kind of trips up entrepreneurs when it comes to selling online.
And in terms of the content side of it, so, content and sales, very different things, but do you have any tips about creating content that can actually convert into sales, or can at least start getting that conversation going that doesn't feel too in your face salesy?
Yeah, and I think that, the first thing you have to do is like understand where your value standpoint is. Like, as a brand, like, how can you deliver value to your customers so that you are satiating these aspects of showing them that you're a legitimate brand, you know what you're talking about. You actually, if your free content is this valuable, then your paid product or service is going to be even super valuable. So we live in a very content rich world where consumers love consuming content, and that's kind of like their daily repertoire. So if you are, again, able to show up as an attention worthy brand through your content, create content that's valuable, that shows people a taste of what you're capable of as a product or service provider, then the rest of it, that will naturally go into sales. So that if you've done a lot of value-based content, and when you pull the trigger on sales, like, after a couple of months of doing that, or a couple of weeks, depending on your sales campaign schedule, it will convert in a very nice, like, fluid way. You'll kind of see it very visually, where you'll see a bunch of people kind of engaging with your value-based content, and then when you're ready to sell, they're kind of right there already to receive that.
That's great. And I think I'm seeing a lot more of that, definitely in the accounts that I'm following now, that people are really being, not everybody, of course, but some people are really being more mindful about adding value and not just throwing out a sales pitch in every post. And it's so easy to fall into that mistake. And, as you said earlier, I think so many of us, when we start out, that is kind of, you go, oh, I need to make sales, and you just push. But if you don't build that relationship first, what's the reason for anyone to buy from me rather than the person beside me? I think it's about being patient and having the confidence to know that the sales will come, but you have to put that legwork in first.
Yeah, patience is the one thing that most entrepreneurs don't have, and that's actually the key to creating a business that is able to convert sales from their content. So that's huge.
since you've now have experience on both sides of things, working with small businesses and running your own, are there some sort of bad habits or mistakes or things that you find a lot of entrepreneurs tend to do in the beginning that that they should avoid?
Yeah, so I think that when entrepreneurs first start out, they are bootstrapping. So they try to do